If you're forgetting something, tie it to your dick.
Next comic, give it loud for everybody for Anthony Eugenio. We're gonna have the next comic. Very funny. Wayne Russell, everybody.
Welcome to the Open Mic Pain with Anthony and Wayne podcast.
Why, hello, everybody, and welcome to an Open Mic Pain with Anthony and Wayne. And today we are here with a very special guest. He is the owner of Ghanekar's Moniker Comedy, which is a really awesome comedy club. They go in Portland, Maine. It's fantastic. He's also a great comedian in and of himself. Me and Wayne saw him before. We're here with Al Ghanekar. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming on, man. And Wayne doesn't have a cool slogan for his name, but I always say if it's a piece of shit, it's Wayne. And there he is. How you doing, Wayne Russell?
Doing pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. So we are very excited to talk to Al because we got like a good string going now of bookers that we're going to interview because we want to give, as much as we like to give an insight into how much shit we eat on a daily basis at open mics, we also like to be, helpful to the open mic community. And there's no more helpful people to come on a podcast than bookers because they help show open micers like, hey, especially ones that are comedians that know what they're doing. They go, hey, this is what bookers are looking for. So you can stop taking your tapes and sending them into the abyss. You may make a tape that people actually want to watch. So, yeah, we're really pumped to have you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anthony and Wayne. It's awesome to be here.
Cool.
So to get started, how did you end up in comedy? What was it that got you to the first point where you first stepped on a stage, grabbed a mic, and said, "I think I can do this"?
I should mention performance has always been a thing. So I did theater in high school, and then acted in indie films throughout my 20s, and I was living in Washington, D.C., so down there a lot of the work that you get is like the stuff they want to make for government industrials and training videos, and, especially post 9/11, being a brown guy, there was plenty of opportunity there. So performance wasn't a new thing to me, but I took a break. I left the acting world because I just got tired of a lot of things, and when after a few years of kind of just living the boring 9-to-5 life, like when I was in my mid-30s, I had for a long time, like I had almost tried comedy in college and got cold feet at the last minute, but then after like 14 more years of life experience, I just had more to write about. And so I think the story is pretty typical with a lot of comedians, where you just look in the world and you have funny stories about your upbringing. You have funny stories. I'm sure you guys can relate. You have all these funny stories you're starting to accumulate of like observations in society. So I collected a bunch of notes in my phone, and then procrastinated. I got to get to a mic. I got to get to a mic. After saying that for about a year and a half, finally I told my wife at the time that like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And the first one I ever went to was Dogfish Bar and Grill. It's over on Free Street in Portland, and it was a music open mic. But you're just so desperate as like when it's this combination of I can't wait to do this and what the hell am I about to do? Oh my God, am I insane? This is the craziest thing ever. And so I wasn't even paying attention to like whether this was music, whatever. I just needed to get behind a microphone somewhere. And so, yeah, that was the first time I did my, just rambled on for like 5 to 7 minutes, at some music open mic and, broke the ice with that. And that was back in late October of 2015.
That's awesome. I haven't brought this up in a while, but when you told your wife, "I'm going to go do comedy," what was her response? Was she like, "That's great, go do it," or was she like, "No, you're not funny. You shouldn't ever"?
You shouldn't. No, my ex-wife, she, it was odd. It was like she was one of those people. We divorced, so obviously things didn't work out. But it was one of the reasons was we were fantastic roommates that just had nothing in common, and that's and so it wasn't like it was anti-support. She always knew, like she could be very critical of me, and everybody has their flaws, including me. But one thing was that she never denied the strengths that I had. That is one thing that I give credit to my ex-wife for, is that she was, so when it came to comedy, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, I believe in you. It was, part of the reason it didn't work out with us was that there were times where talking to her, it was just like, are you even interested in my life? Like, I mean, it's like talking to a wall sometimes. You're just like a great roommate. But there was also never any like, oh, don't do that. She knew that, okay, say what you want about my husband, but he is a performer. He knows he was a good actor. He knows like he's got a lot of flaws, but that is something, performance is something he has a natural ability for. So a lot of it was just sort of like the biggest pushback I ever got was, oh, I thought this was just going to be a hobby, but it seems like you kind of want to do this. Oh, okay. And that was all it was. So it was a slight sting of like, oh God, you have no idea what's inside of me. You have no clue what I'm capable of, and I'm going to show you. There was a little sting of that, but overall I received just, full support even from my ex-wife. And my parents. I'm glad you mentioned this because a lot of things with Indian comics. I was in New York one time, and it was a showcase. So it's like just in New York City, they're just like, "Yep, next, get on stage. Your payment is that you got attention for 5 minutes. Yeah, good. And when you're done, get off stage. That's your payment." So it's comedian after comedian after comedian, and the running theme with all the Indian comedians down there was, "I'm a disappointment to my parents." And so that's something I've always been grateful for. Is my family, friends. They've always been so supportive.
I want to circle back to that point of it with the parents, but I really appreciate a supportive spouse. Anthony and I both have supportive spouses, but it was shortly after, so a few months ago, we both got our first paid shows, and I was out to dinner with my wife, and I said to her, I was like, did when I started this, did you ever think that somebody would give me money to spew the thoughts in my head out to an audience and try to make them laugh? And she goes, yeah, I didn't think they'd pay you that much, but I figured it would happen eventually. I was like, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's helpful. It's very helpful. You have to have people on your side that believe in you, but also at the same time, it's comedy. So, so much about it is making fun of yourself as you're going along. You want people that are with you that are like, hey, yeah, like you're awesome. I'm proud of you. But then if you have a bad night, they're like, yeah, that wasn't a strong set tonight.
Yep, absolutely. Going back to the parents part of it, when we came and saw you at Alana's Soho show last month, and I can say I was thoroughly impressed. I loved your set. It was amazing. Especially, I think Anthony's donning the wear. You had the joke.
Tied to your dick.
Tied to your dick.
Yeah, you got the shirt, man. I'm flattered.
That is such a good joke. I was dying laughing at that. That was fantastic. Is that something that did that really happen?
So that is a real story. That was the first. That was actually that was probably the first joke of my entire comedy career. It was the first thing where I'm like, that's a funny story. And it seems like whenever I tell it to people, I'm sure that you, Anthony, and Wayne have your own examples of this where you're like, that first moment where you're like, this is one of those things that I tell to people and they laugh in groups. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can say this on stage. And so, yeah, it started off as a car conversation. But, yeah, that was a real thing that I in this, for the sake of comedy, you always kind of manufacture the story a little bit. So I don't remember what it was that I forgot. But, yup, my dad, I was a teenager, so I was almost his height, but not quite. And he's looking down at me, and he's just like, you forgot? Yeah. Tie it to your dick from now on, and then you won't forget. And it just writes itself, and it's like it's one of those things, you learn that family humor is the best because nobody can argue with you. And now look at this, it's like my dad has passed a couple of years ago, and he was always like, I used to joke with him that, man, you accidentally wrote so much material for me just by being a wacky dude raising me. and he said, I am glad anything that I can do to help my two sons. So he would be, if ghosts were real or whatever. Oh, he'd be, if heaven is a place, he'd be laughing, or at this tied to your dick thing, because that kind of is a cool way to carry on like that phrase that he made up.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I loved that so much.
If that's how I could be remembered, I would be happy.
That would, yeah. And it's so funny too, because my mother, she understood that, there was a lot of negative things you could say about my dad. You got to be kind of a tough, rough around the edges type of guy to go from a 2-room flat in India to achieving the American dream. So, he had a lot of fire, and sometimes, he came off abrasively. And so my mom, knew that side of him of like, oh, here he goes again, with that. But so she never liked it that like, oh, don't, like, I know how you are. I know the way you are, all vulgar and stuff, but don't talk that way in front of my children, my precious little boys. You know what I mean? And so now we're adults, we're grown men. And so when I'm bringing all this comedy back for my mom, it's a mixed feeling of kind of like, yeah, it's funny and audiences love this stuff, but God, I see this from a different side because I know that guy, and I'm getting reminded of like, yeah, it's so dirty, such a dirty old man, type of thing, But he also was a very like highly intelligent, sophisticated guy in a lot of ways too. But you gotta have that humor in life to make it bearable.
I got a pretty similar introduction to comedy. My dad was an immigrant from Portugal, so equally as violent. And we bought him a humane trap once to get rid of animals in his yard. And this was, in hindsight, wasn't that funny, and I shouldn't have thought I should have said it on stage, but I did a bunch of times to silence. But basically, we bought him a humane trap, and then I went to go visit him, and I realized that he was filling up a cooler full of water and using it to drown animals. And I was like, hey, what are you doing? That is a humane trap to remove him. He goes, I thought you got me a drown box. And that was my first ever joke, was telling that story on stage. And it is hilarious, but I guess not for them. But
Anthony, the question also goes to Wayne too, is for each of you, when you were writing your first like 5 minutes and you're starting off, were you leaning? Some comedians, they're like, oh, what are the big, comics that I love? What are they talking about? Well, they walk right out and they immediately talk about how the world is falling apart in global politics and this, and they talk about things that are not directly related to them. Or did you go the route where you're like, you know what, like stuff about my personal life is the safe stuff, and that's the easier place to write, so let me start with the stuff that I already know I have. Like, what was your approach?
That's a great question. It was all related to things that were in my life. None of it was really true. I kind of took liberties with a lot of things, but it was all funny takes on parts of my life.
Yeah,
I studied Louis a little bit, actually, Louis C.K., which made it was a huge mistake. Because what I did before I went up was he's obviously one of my favorite comedians, and I watched one of his specials, and normally he'll go out there and his first joke is the most outrageous joke that he does throughout the night. It's just a quick get the audience feeling a silly mood before he goes into it. And I'm very analytical, so I was watching specials looking at stuff like that, like how do I engage? And I didn't factor in that they were all going there to see him, so saying the most outrageous thing you can think of for the first thing you say, very jarring to an open mic audience. So I put that, all my familial jokes, like my dad stuff, I put towards the end, and I'm like, I'm going to go crazy in the beginning. And I did a joke about how, like, the first dick pic I ever took, I had to take to a guy at a store to develop it. Like, that's how long ago it was, type of thing.
Right.
And that was the first thing I said. And everybody was like, what? It was in Portland, Maine, actually, Free Street. And it was at the Free Street pub there.
Field Notes,
yeah. Yeah, they didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest mistakes I was making is I was a mix of the both, like where I'm like, yeah, well, I'm trying to emulate, Joe Rogan and Bill Burr and, the people that I love so much, but it's the same thing as like the audience knows them already. So people don't realize back in the 90s, Bill Burr was doing a lot of very personal setup punchline style humor, all this like constructive organized ranting. That style of writing came very later, but I heard a comedian friend, like they had a good analogy. It's like you approach either whatever, a girl in a bar, whatever, you're approaching a woman to court her, or you're just friendly, just talking to somebody. You have to introduce yourself first, right? And that's the same thing with an audience, is like you both can have the shock factor. For like all of us, we can shock the audience, but the thing is, it has to shock them with something that, one, they can't argue with me with, 2, it's best if it's a personal embarrassment. That's why, the all comics, we can tell when somebody walked right out of Comedy 101 class, because the first thing they say when they get on stage is, yeah, I know what I look like. I look like if it was a cross between this celebrity had sex with a camel or whatever. And it right away the audience is just like, oh, I like this person because they're cool and they know how to make fun of themselves. Whereas if I was like right now, I'm not a famous comedian. I have 6 people that would pay tickets to see me. And this is after 7 years of doing it. But even as a comedian with a lot of established good material that's polished on personal things, you know who that wouldn't work in front of? All of my close circle of friends from back home, right? If all of a sudden I was in front of them and we were just out at a bar and they said, hey, you know what, Al, you're a comedian. Why don't you get up on and do stuff? Dude, in front of all my boys who've known me for 30 years, I know what they want to hear. They know me already. I'm going to get up there and start talking about my opinions on vulgar sex stuff, whatever, politics, all this type of stuff, because they're going to love it because they already know Al is a cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whereas
I
with
never thought about it
strangers,
before.
you
That
got to
makes a lot of
first
sense.
prove yourself to them. And so Louis C.K. can walk out in, his 2017 special. The first thing that comes out of his mouth, thank you very much. So, I think abortion is, but
Yes.
but if you rewind, you can find one of those Just for Laughs things, those festivals that launch your career, Just for Laughs or whatever. And Louis is doing 6 minutes. And what did he open up with? Hello, everybody. My name is Louis. I'm a father. I have 2 daughters, and sometimes I lose track of it. And he goes into his first bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
That was what he had to do in the early 2000s.
I've said this a few times on the show, but so I'm a salesman in my day job, and my boss always says to me, "You have to sell yourself before you can sell anything," and that applies to comedy as well. You have to let the audience know that, like you said, you're a cool dude. You're an alright guy before you can go saying all the heinous shit that you really want to say. You have to get them on your side first.
Yes.
Yeah, that was something I struggled at so fucking hard in the beginning, is not understanding where I was, what the situation was, and what they wanted, and just doing the opposite. There was, do you know Wayne Brady, whose line is it anyways?
No, of course I know Wayne Brady. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Some people have said
Some
no,
people
which really
don't know
killed the
him,
joke.
because-
Yes, but I don't know if you know, he came out as pansexual this year. And,
Cool.
yeah, exactly. But I don't know. The whole point is, I made a joke the first week it happened where I said Wayne had a 5-minute dick joke at one point, a full 5 minute. The whole time it was a dick joke. And whenever he for 2 weeks when he would do that, and I'd go after him, I had this joke where I'd say, I don't understand. Wayne Brady came out as pansexual. I have no idea what that is, but I do know that that's the second gayest thing somebody named Wayne has done tonight. And so it did, and the first time I did it, it was awesome. I was so excited. I was like, oh, I came up with such a good improv line. And then I did it right after Jacques Cabaret got canceled, and they all came to a different mic that I was at. And I didn't realize it, but at the same time, they really didn't appreciate that joke. And I started off with that and to silence, and then 4 minutes, complete silence. And that was the first time where I realized that, really, because I was early on, that you can have as polished as a joke as you think you can have. But if you don't warm them up properly or you tank them like I just did, it doesn't fucking matter. The joke's going down.
And also, different material works in different places. Greg Giraldo had one entire hour that he would do only in cities like New York and Chicago, big cities. And then when he would get out of big cities and he would do these smaller town and suburb shows, he had literally a full different hour of material that he would do for the city versus for the country.
Wow.
He's one of my saddest things. I think he obviously taken way too soon, but I can only imagine what he would be today if he had not passed away. That guy was so goddamn funny.
He was, yeah. It was sad.
Yeah, him, Patrice. Those are the what could have beens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's why that brings up an interesting point. Is that I used to think, how old are each of you?
I'm 36.
36. 32. That's great, actually, because I started when I was 34, and so sometimes you might get the feeling of Man, if I had started when I was 20, imagine where I'd be right now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the more and more that I look at, just the industry and everything, I see that, like, yeah, I have way further that I want to climb. But you also have to understand that it all comes at a price, and it's like, what's the price you're willing to pay? Because I think that the biggest thing that when people embark on a journey like I'm going to be a comedian, and obviously every comedian nowadays, what's our biggest thing we want to do? Get on late night or get a special? You want your first big comedy special in 10, 15 years, whatever. Whether it's that or whether your journey is that you want to become a U.S. Marine, if the attitude is, this is what's going to give me self-esteem, this is what's going to make me feel good about me, no. You got it backwards. You have to feel like, I'm actually grateful that I gained life experience and I learned how to love myself first. Like, I mean, not like love yourself, like, in that way, but like, like for real, being able to get to a place where you're like, yeah, like I'm okay in my own skin. Because a lot of times what happens to people is they're like, yeah, yes, once I have fame and fortune, then I'll have self-esteem. And then it's like, crap, well, I still don't have that, all I got is, booze and pills and drugs and, and fame and fortune. And then it's just like, yeah, it's the sad things like that happen,
And
That's
self-deprecation is really hard if you don't have respect for yourself, because it's just like if you shit on comics are awesome because we can shit on each other and we laugh with each other, and it's awesome. We don't take it to heart, but that's because we like each other, and so that's why the jokes land. If you roast somebody and you don't like them, it comes off as mean. And I think it's the same thing when you're joking about yourself. Like, you gotta have that self-respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, you have two sides to you, and it's like, now the beauty of one of the greatest things that came with the internet is just the democratization of the access to information. And one of the things you hear a lot out in, the spiritual world on YouTube is you got two sides to you. You got that higher self that, feels like, yeah, I'm on a mission and I'm connected to everything, and it's not all about me. It's about what I can do to bring joy to this world. But then you also have that other side, which is that ego, and it's like, man, why do I do this? Nobody cares about anything I say, like, and when you get that ego on a leash and realize that that's not you, what comedy has become for me. It started off as just getting on stage and telling jokes. I wanted to get on stage, tell jokes, and be accepted. That's all it is. You get this feeling of acceptance. But over time, what I've realized is I'm getting on stage to express myself. The only reason I'm telling jokes is because I have fun doing it that way, and that's the only way I hold your attention. I would love to get paid $100 to just stand somewhere and talk about myself for a half hour and have people laugh for no reason and love me. It doesn't work that way. So when I get on stage, I'm taking that ego of mine that feels like annoyance and frustration and sexual frustration, and, or maybe I'm in a time in my life where I'm getting too much sex and this woman is annoying me. Whatever it is that's going on that's heightening my emotions in life, I'm exaggerating it. I'm taking that and I'm like, you know what? Let's take this ego that's fragile and bitches and complains all the time, and let's wave him around on stage. Let's take some of the thoughts that I don't really want to share with people, but I can turn funny, and I can say, hey, everybody, here's all my flaws. Here's my fucked up way of looking at the world sometimes, and, but we're all kind of messed up, and let's have a laugh about it. That's what comedy has turned into for me.
Would you say that was you finding your voice? Because we ask a lot of, because we're so infantile. Finding your voice is like a question that we're always trying to think about, because we don't know what that really means yet. But we find comedians who've been in the game a little bit longer seem to have that epiphany at some point and are able to write towards their character, if you will. But is that kind of your situation with that?
That's a very good question. Yeah, because that is a big thing of like, it takes 10 years or X years to develop your stage persona. Bob DeBono, he's a comedian in New York City who's been ranked as like the top Trump impersonator ever. It's almost like you can't even tell the difference. His impersonation is one of the best I've ever seen. He won on The View. He's been like a pseudo mentor to me, and he talked about the whole stage persona thing, and he said, man, a lot of it is just getting up a lot. You get up, the more and more you get up on stage, and I'll admit right now I'm in a little bit of a show slump. Lately I've been kind of feeling like, Jesus Christ, you even a comedian anymore? But that happens. But the more and more you get on stage over a long period of time, I could be wrong. My answer on this could change, but I'm 7 years in, so I'm still thinking. I'm still not. I don't feel like my persona has fully developed, but I think the persona is based around what are the subjects that heighten your emotion the most in your life. Because that's, I've seen comedians and I've made the mistake of being like, God, this joke keeps bombing. But I'll give you an example. I had a joke that was like, when I was a teenager, I didn't know what a sexual orientation was, but I tried to find mine using a compass. I knew I was straight, thought I was gay. Turns out I was north. That joke worked 50% of the time. Why? Because it's not genuine. I never did that. The audience knows that I'm not going into weird Bonkersville where they can come along with me. I'm going into this weird fake Bonkersville where I'm just kind of trying to make a joke. But is there any relatable emotion there, really? Is there any, oh no, he's in a situation. I hope I'm not in that situation, but I'm going to laugh at the joy that he's in that situation instead of me, and he lived to tell the tale on stage. That's what they're laughing at. So it's a big myth. I've had to tell myself that, dude, you got to stop being so attached to this joke. It's not worth it, and it's not even genuine. You don't even feel it, man. You feel so much more about, you drive around still resenting an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife. Write about that. That's where your emotions are, because then that's what triggers people in the audience to go like, ooh, I can relate. It's the emotions plus the words that create that laughter. And I think those emotions are where you're coming back to persona. That's where your persona comes from. It's just, and who knows, in 3 years, I might be looking back and telling you, guys, yeah, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about back there. It's actually this, But I think that's what it is. I think it's about, what subjects do you really, what drives you to talk on stage? What is it? Everything you say on stage, you should be able to answer the question, okay, that joke. Why did you decide to talk about that tonight? Why was it so important for you to deliver that message to us? And if the answer is, oh, I don't know, I just wanted to make a joke, then get rid of it. Then you don't have anything real there that you're trying to communicate to the audience. When I go up and I say, diet to your dick, what's the message? What's the message in all that? The message is, my family's weird. That's the message. There's always a message behind it. And the message for family humor is, my family's weird. The message for my girlfriend was being a hypocrite is that, hey, let me show you a male perspective. Right.
So then that goes into your writing style. What, how do you write? What do you write? Sitting down, pen and paper, all that? Do you wait for the inspiration to hit you, and then you go on stage and try to work it out? Is it stories from the past? How do you get to to that point?
It's a mix of both. So I feel that certain material, there's when it comes to writing, I try to have a middle ground between, I'm so disciplined that no matter what, like Joe Rogan says, Joe always says 1 hour a day, sit down, and even if it's dog shit, just write something, right? I don't do that. What I do instead is I have those little, you probably do the same thing. You send little notes to yourself in the email, right? I take something there, and then I'll sit down and go, okay, let's rant this out. Let's hash this out. First blab it all out. The first time that you tell it, I have a really bad habit of over-editing on that first writing. We have this delusion that, oh, they're going to love this. And then 3 weeks later, you're like, what the hell was I thinking? That sucked. That was such low-hanging fruit crap. I can do way better than that. But it's important on that first pass that, first time I tried it, and I rarely go to open mics, but I tried it at open mic, and it just blab it out and see where the funny is. And then with real audience, the real test is an audience that paid tickets. When you're in front of a ticket-paying audience, if you're repeatedly seeing on your recordings that punchline is not working and it's getting a chuckle, you got to get rid of it. And so that's how I then refine and polish. And then when it comes to certain jokes, especially the stuff with family, anything that's really, really so emotionally charging, I've spent years feeling it, and I'm finally writing about it. A lot of that stuff, I don't even have to ever put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. A lot of that stuff, you remember, you make a note, oh, there's 4 little punchlines in this joke. Remember to try this one, this one, this one, and this one. You know, you remember it more easily because you're talking about your mom or this annoying thing your brother does or something that literally just happened to you. And, you know, so I try to be effective, efficient, or effective, not just efficient. Because I can sit there and aimlessly write and accomplish nothing. But I can say to myself, like, oh, wow, I feel like I worked today. And I can have better success if I do a little bit less work and try to sometimes just rant it out on stage. Certain things you might not have to put pen to paper. And, you know, sometimes the hard work, like we live in a culture now where it's all about like, you know, hustle culture and work hard. But sometimes though, you know, doing a lot of things doesn't mean you're getting a lot done. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of both. Sometimes I just do make jokes verbally, and then I'll realize, okay, you're onto something. Now it's time to write this down so you don't forget. And sometimes I've done it the opposite. I've been a good little boy and nice and nerdy and academic. I get my little stuff all nice and structured, and then I read it off a piece of paper on stage, and, you know, so.
I like what you said about, just going back a little bit, but having bits that actually mean something to you are they're the ones that really hit home. You can really sell those a lot more. And I do find, and Anthony said this to me before, where he's like, yeah, this joke works, that doesn't work, this doesn't work, that works. And everything he says that it works to is stuff that is means a little bit more to me, that's a little more personal. It's not just some funny quip that I came up with. It's something that it happened to me and I'm just taking a funny spin on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think that's a really important lesson to take away.
I get drawn all the time towards, because I have stuff that is like, I don't want to call similar to yours, Al, but I just mean in the sense of like I talk about my family and that type of thing, and it's a little bit more grounded. But I have some sets that's absurdist, observationalist stuff, things that are just silly that make me laugh, that like is so hard to have a connection on. Like I have a joke called Compromise, where I went to my old town when I was younger and I got a prostitute, but I found out in the middle of it that the prostitute was not a woman, if you know what I mean. And so, but I didn't want to walk away from the deal, and so I wanted to make a compromise. So after an exhaustive round, we figured it out, and she came on my tits. So that joke, I can't. I thought of it just as that quick setup and punchline of a misdirection at the end of it, and it means nothing to me, but I can't help but do it all the time. If I want to have a silly set.
Well, and you know, and a lot with I did a workshop one time with my pseudo mentor Bob DeBono, and it's, you know, one-on-one, and for $150 for 90 minutes, we sat there and I worked through. I workshopped my mediocre bits, and I was telling him, man, it's so frustrating how all the material that's so good that if you don't laugh, I know you're wrong. What it all has in common is it has to have something to do with my ethnicity or my family or blah, blah, blah. And I was frustrated, and I was complaining to Bob that there's other crap that I've written and some of that works too. A lot of that works, but then there's also this other stuff where I'm like, come on, man, this is like a great subject. And we went over it, and what he told me was, all right, Al, this material is not working because it has nothing to do with your ethnicity. It's not working because they're just not good, well-written jokes. And the reason, that doesn't mean you're a bad comedian. He said the reason they're not well-written, Al, is because with your family, you've spent years feeling this stuff. You know exactly what to write down, and it's your family. You're a brown guy. You get on stage, people can see that. It's very easily accessible to the audience. When you're trying to do this joke about how it's silly to call people who eat meat occasionally flexitarian, the bits that you wrote out for it, the punchlines, they're all just low-hanging fruit. You're not digging into your feelings enough, Al. And your feelings are where the uniqueness is going to come from. So let's say, you know, you have that prostitute story, right? Go through it and you start writing down, not how do I come up with a punchline? Write down all the emotions that you felt surrounding that. And so, like, I have this, you know, vulgar joke that I do, but it's just based off a true story. And it's about being suffocated during 69. And it's real. It's real. And the first time I wrote it, I had 3 major punchlines. They worked. After I workshopped that with Bob, and I started getting, because, I mean, being suffocated while you're getting blown, there's a lot of emotion involved in that. You're talking about cutting off your air supply, and then also experiencing the pleasure of sex. These are very relatable things. So I started digging into my feelings, and I came up with punchlines like, wait a minute, what is it like to get your dick sucked and be suffocated? It's exciting, and it's terrifying. Well, what else is exciting and terrifying? So the punchline I wrote was, you wouldn't believe it. Well, no, I didn't say you wouldn't believe it. That's all. It sounds all 90 comedian. You wouldn't believe it. But the punchline that I wrote for that was, oh my God, 69ing with this woman is like the haunted mansion of sex positions. So there, I just started researching online, and I saw, okay, Disneyland. I mean, I went to Disneyland. Everybody can relate to that. What's something there that's haunting and exciting and all that kind of stuff? The haunted, and something that's, a word that people are gonna know, like not a ride at Disneyland that's so fucking narrow that nobody gets the reference, So right there, all I did was dig more into how I felt like, and I've noticed, how you Anthony and Wayne were saying how like you go. This is one of the things I've loved about you from watching your first podcast. You studied what comedy is before, so when you study it, I noticed that what professional comedians do is they're really slowing down what happened. So it's not just, she came up to me, I thought it was a woman, and it turned out, it was a guy, or it wasn't a woman, whatever. Like, slow that down. Go moment by moment and analyze every single emotion, and I guarantee you're going to find some serious gold in there. Because, again, that's a very relatable thing, right? Guys are horny. Sometimes we go to, some guys go to prostitutes sometimes, and then you can have you're rolling the dice. Already just the whole idea of, I went to a prostitute. Oh, you got my attention, Anthony. Because I'm like, holy shit, I'm listening, because right away, that's an unknown, scary experience where you're about to stick your dick inside of a stranger.
Tell me.
Immediately people are going to be engaged. So don't give up on that bit. Like, there's a lot of gold behind that because it happened to you. You might have to exaggerate, but there's a whole world of emotions there that you can play with.
Yeah, that is true. Because there's there was before another joke where I tried to do the same thing, where I had a real experience where I went to the doctor for the first time after 30. And it was way different than before you're 30 because they care a lot more and they look into things and blah, blah, blah. And I had a stomach ache and the guy was doing all kinds of stuff, MRIs, all that kind of situation. So it was a real setup that actually happened. But the punchline I took it to was he ended up, because true story, they eventually will give you a rectal exam if they can't figure anything else out. So he did. And the ending of the joke is that he says, I'm sorry to inform you, but you have AIDS. And I said, how did you figure that out with just a rectal exam? And he zipped up his pants and said, because I have AIDS. And that's the end of the joke. And
oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's like, let me ask you, is that true? Is that literally true?
No, he didn't rape me and then give me AIDS, buddy.
That's man, that's the tough thing. The other thing about open mics is if you do poorly at open mics, don't emotionally kill yourself. Yeah. And also, if you do really, really well, it can also be because your joke is so messed up that twisted comedians are listening.
It's true. That's where they come from.
It got our attention. So then you do it in front of a real audience and you're like, oh crap, I thought that everybody loved that one. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have people that are as twisted as comics in the room, they will love it. Oh, let me ask you, have either of you guys, like, how many real shows are you getting on? Like, like you're getting out there and like, outside of open mics doing stuff, right?
Yeah, we're starting to get some. I think we've done 3 or 4 a piece at this point.
Yeah, so it happened about 3 or 4 months ago. We started getting booked on some stuff, and it's been like once a month since then. So we used to say when we first started, we're like, man, we see people get a gig or 2 a week, and we're like, man, could you imagine going out like 3 times a week, a couple times a real shows, maybe once a week's an open mic? That's kind of the dream. But it's such a far distant memory. And then we started getting once a month, and we can see the horizon. We're like, wow, I can see shows, starting to get booked. More people are. Yeah, the first time we're doing real shows, too, we're noticing that real crowds are so much fucking better than comics who don't want to hear your jokes. It was, yeah. It's incredible.
Well, there's a saying that if they ain't paying attention.
Yeah, it's true.
That's why it's like when I produce, the 2 shows only that I produce, I'm not going to sit here and make it sound like I'm some big New England producer or something like that. But the 2 shows I produce, a big reason I did it is for the learning experience, because the business side teaches you more about the craft. And so, yeah, that's like, that was, a big thing, is that no free stuff. Like, there is no, other comedians do that, and I think that it's appropriate for, like, a Tuesday night. You're just like, hey, come on out, have some laughs, throw $5 in the end. We got 5 comedians doing 10 minutes each, and it's just the weekly show at, wherever. That's different. But for like a Saturday night show, yeah, you guys notice that, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden you're in front of a real audience and you're like, oh, this is sort of a layup. Like, oh my God, this is this is a lot easier, because they've put the money down. They've paid $15, $20, $30, and they're like, yeah, like, if you pay that money, you're going to be paying attention.
For sure. The other part of that too is other people are paying the money, so they don't want people disrupting the show. So they'll get the side eye, they'll get the unwelcome, stares and stuff if they're disruptive.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could just see the evolution of a real like a specialed comedian, like a Tom Segura or Eddie Murphy, any of these guys, is that they have the ability to take a story and really take you through an elaborate setup throughout something where you're so far into the woods that you have no idea where it's going before they turn it around. And that's because they have been in front of real audiences who will allow that for so long that they can feel comfortable writing that. Us at open mics, we're so reluctant to have an intricate setup because no one's fucking really paying attention. You're like, hey, this is so quick, on, so you keep their attention. And I think that's like, you hear that about like New York club comics are a very similar way because it's such volatile crowds. So they're very, Andrew Schultz is a good example of this, where he talked about, one of his biggest changes to writing for specials was getting out of that like punchline every 5 seconds type of effect. So I do like real crowds for that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like learning, that's the thing I learned. I did a show for Matt Golightly, and this guy opens for Fluffy. He's been opening for Fluffy for the last 6 years, so he's like national headliner. This was like one of those things where it's like you just pay $1,500 in travel costs to make $100 because you want the experience. So I remember I had like earmarked the money. I was like, I'm going, and I just want to see what it's like to be in another city. A lot of comics do this where they're like, I want to, perform. Mike Stricker is from Chicago. He's like, he wants to perform in all 50 states and stuff. And so I went down, and I screwed up massively at this San Antonio show where, for me, it felt massively. Really what it was the beginning of my set started off like kind of weak because I wasn't good at getting people's attention opening and going into a cold audience. I was still not very good at that at all. And I was starting too early right away, like, oh, hey, what's up, everybody? And then I'm getting into my jokes, like with a quick, how you doing? And it was a big mistake. And like I got them in the beginning. They were laughing, but then I wasn't adjusting my material for like, Saturday night crowd. It's late, people are drinking, like maybe stop with the cerebral humor about how Facebook is destroying the world, and instead stick to the simpler stuff, and I learned that watching Matt, being a national headliner and very experienced, he was just like, he wasn't treating it like his Netflix special. It wasn't like set up, punchline, joke, this. There was a woman who challenged him to a push-up contest and interrupted one of his jokes, and it was like 22 people. He was like, whatever, get up here, we'll do a push-up contest. And then they did push-ups together, and he lost, and then she sat back down, and he just continued with his next joke, and I learned that, like, don't be so attached to your material. Like, don't be so attached to your set. Be professional, but if everything goes haywire and in the end you couldn't even barely get a single word in, but they had a good time, you did your job.
Yeah, that is the truest statement, I gotta tell you. And that is, we've been working on that for a while because we've had a couple episodes that we talked about bombing. And the through line throughout is that it got chaotic in there and we didn't know how to handle it, so we just went right into material. And we experienced that on a show that we did at O'Shea's a couple weeks ago in Londonderry, where there was a little bit of crowd talking that was not too disruptive, but it was in a coffee shop, so they're grinding beans and all that. And it was a little hard to get people to buy into the material. And Tristan Hoffler, who's a great comedian that is local in Manchester, he in the middle of it, he's like, this room feels a little weird right now. Then he just started doing crowd work. And he blew the place down with crowd work afterwards. He did so fantastic. He said afterwards it was one of the best sets he ever had because he did like 15 minutes of crowd work afterwards or whatever that it goes to it. But it was just like I remember sitting there going, man, I can't do that. I can't just abandon and go into the wild like that. But it is a really cool thing to see someone free like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The best advice I got in New York, because I'm not great at crowd work, I'm still getting better at it. And I remember at a show where I was headlining I was the 30-minute headliner, and it was a tough room. And, that first time where you're like, all right, I'm going to jump off the deep end. The advice I had in my mind was from this guy at an open mic in New York. And I was like, yeah, man, you're good at that. How do you do that? And he told me, he goes, well, he said, I only use it when things are going south anyway. And so he said, the mistake that comics make who are new to crowd work, and this is something I still kind of do, I'm trying to get over, is when you start it, your immediate thought is, oh, I got to hurry up and figure out how to make this funny. And instead, the attitude should be, this was the greatest advice he gave me. He goes, your set is already going shitty. It's not going to get much worse. So when you're doing the crowd work, let it build. Let the awkwardness build. Don't worry about anything funny occurring, because what's going to happen? It's not going to get much worse. So
yeah, it is true how simple crowd work really is.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because the best crowd work is always the simplest of interactions. There's just good pauses and awkwardness that builds tension and releases. So that is right. That's like when we learned pretty quickly that you can allow pauses in comedy. We talked about that before, where we would never allow dead air in the mic in between jokes. The jokes were starting as soon as the laughter stopped and we were going between. But pauses are make or break some of my jokes now. Like, they're not funny without it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all tension.
It's a hard thing to get over. It's a very hard thing to get over. And it just comes with time. That one comes with practice, and it does feel good too when you are like in the middle of your act. You know that the middle part has this huge crescendo, because I do this bit that's it's surrounding my dad's death, and I mean it's a combination of dark, emotional, and it starts strong, it ends strong, and after that section, I always have to tell myself, walk over calmly to the stool, pick up your water, take a sip, and it's the first time that I did that. And I was able to like really control that feeling of like, got to get to my next joke. It really feels good when like they're recovering from the previous joke. The laughter slowly dies down and then they get quiet. And you have a room of like 34 people and they're just quietly listening for you to finish sipping the water. And then you're just like, yeah, I love living over here on the East Coast. And you just get into your next thing. And it feels good. Like you walk off feeling like, I'm in control. Like I have them. You know what I mean? And like there is this like we want so much noise in the room, and we want the frickin' fire department to be called because our set was so good. But there is also a lot of beauty in that silence because it means they're listening.
Yeah,
that is true. The embrace the silence is something that I've in more ways than one. Sometimes you're just bombing and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to take this in and I'm going to take this as a learning experience. But sometimes, like you said, you have something that's a little more intricate, where the silence means something more than you're doing shitty, and that's a nice feeling as well.
You know a great way to prepare for it too is the times when you're at an open mic, or you're in front of a tough crowd, or you're doing a bit that you haven't developed very well, and it doesn't work at the end, but you end it strongly, end it confidently, still do your pause, calmly take your sip of water in a quiet room. They're not recovering from anything. And you still just calmly get into your next bit. That's a good practice run.
Yeah.
Because then when you're in a situation where you did end on a long, strong crescendo, then it's a lot easier to do it. It's like the equivalent of like when the baseball player's swinging like 4 bats so that one bat feels light.
Oh man, yeah. Sometimes the urge that I got to fight against when that happens so frequently as it does is to say like, "Hey, when I practiced that in the car, you guys laughed in my head," and it really sucks to not have that. But man, you got to fight that urge not to say that.
Oh, and some stuff is just not going to work for some people. That's just the way it is. I mean, I you know, we're both on the same wavelength that, you know, I also like to go to people's shows and study how they do things. And like when you watch the audience at these big Netflix specials and stuff, like every third person clearly looks like they're paying attention and enjoying, and they're not laughing. And they got this smirk on their face. And or maybe their response to a great Dave Chappelle bit is to just nod their head in like acceptance, and that's how they absorb comedy. And I'm like, but doesn't mean they're not having a good time. And this is at a freaking Netflix special, so you know, don't feel so bad if you're looking across your audience and you know you see some people that are just staring at you the whole time, because believe it or not, some of those people, they'll come up to you afterwards and be like, I had such a great time, and you're like, okay.
I've said that to Anthony before, where you know we've had some crowds that have been pretty quiet, and you know when you're on stage you don't always notice it, but you know, when Anthony's on stage, I'll watch the crowd and vice versa, and I'll see they're what I call quiet laughers, people that don't have the boisterous laugh, you know, they're hand over the mouth and like what the fuck was that dog from Wacky Racers? You know, they just do the quiet little type of thing, you know.
And then sometimes you get that one lady. You're going to experience this a lot. There'll always be that one lady where the joke works and you hear an eruption of laughter, and then continuing on in the background, you hear. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, if I could just get 2,400 of you, ma'am, and fill an auditorium, like most of my entire 1 hour special will just be them laughing.
It sounded like
Why
a
can't
screen
everybody
door.
be like you? I did have a funny story, but like I won't mention his name because I don't want it to get misconstrued. Some people will be like, "Oh, that happened because he sucks." You know, no. There was a comic, I saw him do a full hour, and he was like a few steps above me. Like I hadn't had an hour, like I had like probably a half hour of material, and I was like, "Ooh, how do you like write an hour of material?" There was a dude across the room this old man falling asleep the entire show. I took this comic out to lunch because I was like, let me pick your brain. And I was like, yo, so how do you deal with that, man? Like there was like, fucking 30 people in the room, and there's this guy on the corner falling asleep. And he tells me, believe it or not, man, that guy, it was his second time paying money to watch my full hour. After my first hour, I went up to him and I said, hey, he came up to the comedian and said, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I asked him, yeah, but I noticed that every time I tell a joke, you just lean back and shut your eyes and you look like you're dozing off. Like it didn't look like you were having a good time. And that guy told me, no, that's actually how I absorb comedy. When I listen to a joke, I like to fully listen to it, and then I close my eyes, and I fully repeat it in my head, and then I fully get it. So that's what he's doing. This dude is closing his eyes during your set, repeating the joke, then fully understanding it like a book, and then opening his eyes to listen to the next one. That's how he goes to comedy shows.
Wow. Joke sommelier right there.
I couldn't believe it when this headliner told me that. I was like, no way, man. But it really taught me a lesson that, like, you know, sometimes, you know, don't feel like you're doing worse than you are. Don't feel like you're doing better than you are, but don't feel like you're doing worse than you are sometimes.
That's true. Ed Driscoll, who we interviewed, a comedian, he wrote for the Drew Carey Show and stuff like that. He's awesome. He told us that that is open mic comedy, unfortunately, is in front of other comedians, and how comedians usually laugh at jokes is we go like, that's funny. Like we usually just point and we'll say something like that. So that's the problem with why we can't get so down on ourselves at quiet rooms, is because most of the time, even when they think it's funny, we just kind of nod our heads and say, yeah, that is kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So we're going to round this thing down a little bit, but I wanted to ask you first, because you were talking about writing, and you said that when you saw an hour comedian, when you had a half an hour, like, man, how do you write for an hour? Well, go back in time even further, because where we're at right now, we're like, how the hell do you write for a half an hour? So my question to you is, did you have jokes that were in like your 15-minute chunk that are the same amount of jokes to get to your 30-minute chunk? You just expanded on them more, and that's how you wrote? Or did you just keep piling smaller jokes on top of each other to get to it? Like, what is writing?
Yep,
for that?
it's the second one. It's the second one. This is why they say write. And I'll admit I could be more disciplined with the writing, because, you know, the attitude you got to go in with is this is not literal, but 90% of the stuff that you write is going to bomb. That's the attitude you want to have, is that you're keeping the 10% of it, and anything more than 10% is a gift. So,
Literal.
no, you do not. My recommendation is, if you just try to take a bit and try to slow it down just to build up the time, you're going to notice that. Bob, my one thing my mentor said was, I know you can talk for an hour, but can you entertain for an hour? And that's the key thing, is that you really want to be, whatever, averaging a punchline every 10 to 20 seconds. Obviously, at the beginning of your set, it's got to be more of a roll of laughter. By the 15-minute, 20-minute mark, they need a break from all the laughter. That's when you're taking your water sips and you're adding up time, because they love you so much that they're laughing at the middle of your set even harder because you've won them over. But it's all about writing, and having an hour of material where you are actually averaging a punchline every 15 to, and then 15 seconds. And then for the longer stories, once you have the audience, if a punchline takes 30 to 45 seconds and it's a big payoff, that's fine. But yeah, don't just try to pad the runtime just so we can all brag on Facebook that we did our first hour. It's, deep down inside, when you go to bed at night, you're going to know that you're full of shit.
Oh man,
Not you specifically, just you,
No,
the
100%.
proverbial you.
Yeah, we have a lot
you know
of
how
that.
it is in this day and age. You know how it is, right? We all can get on social media. We can take photos of ourselves, and I can make it look like I'm crushing it all over the country. I can go to comedy clubs and just take selfies of myself with the stage behind me and lie my ass off about what it is that I'm doing and look fantastic on there. But this is every journey is a personal journey also, and you want to be proud of yourself and your craft. You want to know that, like, hey, not only when I say that I can do a half hour, it's because I have 45 minutes of material. So I'm promising you a half hour in case we got to play choose your own adventure, because this audience doesn't like porn, and this audience doesn't like politics, and this one, for some reason, doesn't give a shit about my family, and they want to hear nothing about my sex life. You need to have that buffer, and you want to know to yourself that, I'm not just trying to look good as a comedian. I actually want to work on my craft and get better at this. And only you are going to know that. You know to yourself that, I'm working on this in a way that makes me proud.
That was a fantastic way to put it.
But before we wrap up too much, Al, when did you decide to start putting on your own shows?
Oh, this was recent. This was just last year. No, actually, the August of 2022. Yeah, and that was recommended to me by another comic, and he was like, yeah, you need it's for the stage time, try to get as many rooms as you can, and just that way you're getting up on stage regularly and you're learning that side of it. So yeah, been a year and a half.
The Goodwill Hunting motto. I think about that a lot.
What's the motto again?
So in Goodwill Hunting, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote that movie because they wanted to just be in a movie. They were like, it's so hard to get in a movie, we're just going to make our own fucking movie. And they did, and it ended up being like the best thing they ever did, because they got so good at their craft doing that then launched their careers.
And an excellent film that was. Yeah.
Yeah, Robin Williams, baby.
So with that, just for, selfishly for us, but also for people listening, what are you looking for? If somebody was to email you or text you or whatever your preferred mode of contact is, what are you looking for? If somebody was to say, "Hey Al, I want to be on your show," they send you a tape.
Yeah.
You watch it. Like, what are you looking for specifically? Are you looking for a good stage? Obviously, a stage presence. Jokes are important. You don't want somebody looking, like somebody walking off out of a dumpster or whatever. What is it specifically that you're looking for when people are sending you, "Hey, I want to be in one of your shows"?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. That's stand-up comedy industry standards, with my own personal twist on things, my own personal preferences. So yes, if you're a brand new comedian and you're like, hey, I'm just trying to get 5 minutes of, unpaid stage time on your show. Well, yeah, if you send me something and I can see that it's an open mic, but clearly, okay, just because it's an open mic and maybe people aren't laughing as hard, I can clearly tell you understand the craft and you're clearly working on jokes. Like you understand that this is not about getting on stage and ranting and figuring it out, but you know how to write jokes. Yeah, that person, like I always gauge somebody based on where they're at in their career. Somebody who's a headliner that's going to be doing 45 minutes for me. Like it's just, you're watching, you can see that you go on YouTube, they might have a Don't Tell comedy special, some credits to their name. Or maybe they have no credits, but they have a really great, video. And even if it's some grainy video from 10 years ago, you can clearly see, okay, this person's obviously a headliner, or a feature or whatever they are. And then besides comedic thing, my big thing is I stick to a lot of the rules that I learned and that I've been told, which is no shorts on stage. I want you coming to my shows looking like a professional. Like, it doesn't mean you can, if your outfit is something where you need to look a little sloppy because it's part of your persona, that's fine. If it's part of your comedic persona, great. But you can't walk on to the mic looking like you just walked off a 4th of July barbecue. So professionalism, I've made the mistake. I had a conversation with a booker today that said, they said they won't book me again because on their first show I made a mistake and I was 10, 15 minutes late. Everybody makes mistakes, but most of the time I am always like big on show up a half hour early. Communication is important. And so those are the big things that I look for.
That makes a lot of sense. And that seems pretty standard and if you're going to do anything at all, just the common courtesies of doing business, I guess, right?
And the thing is, I'm having a self-conscious, thought of like, just, I don't want to run the risk of sounding like I'm some legend in my own mind. Like, my shows, like right now as a producer, it's kind of like I've been starting from square one because you're learning a new craft now. You're learning comedy from the production side, how to market, how to, attention, interest, decision, action. You're learning all of that, like all these buzzwords that I've hated hearing all my life. And so I just want to make it clear. It's like I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, if you want to get on my shows, this is what I expect. My shows right now are averaging 30 to 40 people. And that's on a really, really good night. I'm still learning how to up those numbers, and so like I'm pretty lenient, is what I'm trying to say. I'm pretty lenient with people. I want to give people opportunities. I always put myself in their shoes of like what it's like to ask a book, because I'm doing that right now. I ask people to get on their stages, and sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no. So I know how that feels, and I've encountered bookers where I'm like, what do you think you're running over there? You're doing the show in the back of a bar and you're sitting here acting like you're running the Borgata in Atlantic City. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and so my requirements are also pretty lenient, I think.
So I watched, I was skimming through your Instagram, and I saw a video. You were in New York City. I think this was a while ago. This might have been like last August or September or something like that. You went down to New York and you went out to a club, and you did this little rant about somebody saying something along the lines of, "You never put me on your shows," and you said you never follow up with me.
Yeah.
So one of my thoughts was, I don't want to be the pestery little bitch saying like, "Hey, I sent you a 3-minute clip a month ago. You haven't even responded to me or watched it." Is that something people should be doing? Or should you be?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid. You can't nag people. Don't be following up with people I read the room. I've had there's one booker where I used to work with him a lot, and now for some reason he doesn't book me. It's so easy to start taking it personal or something like that. Oh, he must hate me or no. So I noticed that with him, I shouldn't be following up once a month. I should be following up quarterly. But for other people, yeah, if the first couple of times, if it takes every 2 weeks, you're just checking in with them, and then they finally respond, and then go from there. Absolutely.
I always say one of my favorite things to say is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. I get a lot of shit for that sometimes, but it's kind of like sales. Like I said, I'm a salesman. So if you don't follow up on your quotes or whatever, you're never going to get the order.
If you don't ask, the answer is always no. And what's worse about it is it's you kicking yourself in the nuts. The answer is no, and that answer came from you.
Yeah.
Because you decided not even to try. And, again, you can't be annoying, but also at the same time, it's like when I got that, when I was talking to that comic who said that, by the way, they are booked on my show coming up on March 30th. So if you reach out to me and I see that you're taking responsibility for your stage time, and I have an email sitting, like from Anthony, for example, and I have like an open spot. My next open spot where I have a guest spot available, it's going to go to the last person that I've noticed or the first person that's been following up with me the most. If I diss you then and I'm like, oh, I forgot about you and I just booked somebody else, that's on me. That's not good. If I'm seeing nobody should have to like be beating down my door. That's ridiculous. But if I see that like, oh, okay, here's a comic that hardly ever reaches out, but then here's a comic that is reaching out regularly, obviously I can see who wants it more.
Yeah, I'm glad that you feel that way, because I know that there are comics out there. I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to out the booker, but there have been comics that we know who have reached out to a booker who has been like, yeah, I definitely want to get you on something. I'm going to totally get you on it. And then the comic will follow up a couple weeks later and they'll get a really mean response back, like, hey, get off my back, like that kind of thing. And it really discourages those comics from sending out tape to other people. Like it really
It's happened to me. Yeah, it's happened to me before, and it stings, man. It stings, and you got to start telling yourself like, don't fucking reply in anger. Don't calm down, get a few. It's a blow to your ego when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a infamous booker we talked about since almost the first episode that we weren't even trying to get booked on. We were just doing that like in general conversation. And we were like, oh, we started a podcast. Here's the thing. And he was like, don't give a fuck about that. Don't want to see your shit. Don't. And he listed all the things underneath. We were like, God damn. Like, this is the first person with booking experience we talked to. And he let us know what he was into or not into.
And I promise you, your skin will get thicker as you go through this. It's to the point where like somebody can send me a scathing. But this doesn't happen. This hasn't happened. But because I don't fuck people over. But somebody can send me something like, hey, come on, man, enough. You're being annoying. It doesn't hurt me the way it used to. Because like it's one of the beauties you're gonna find about this is like you're gonna become so much stronger, like ego wise. You're not gonna be so fragile. I'm not saying you guys are fragile, but it's easy. Newcomers can be fragile when it comes to like, oh fuck it, this booker doesn't like me, or everybody's thinking negatively about me. And at some point it's just sort of like, all right, as a comedian, all these different places that you work, it's kind of like getting jobs at a whole bunch of different companies for one night. Some companies are just not gonna hire you.
That's true.
It's true.
We do say that a lot now.
Yeah.
Well, Wayne, anything else you got before we wrap it up?
No, I think I'm pretty good at that point.
Bam. So, everybody out there, please check out Al's stuff, Al Ghanekar Comedy. He is going to be around in Portland, like we talked about. So how often do you do those shows? You said March 30th? Is that the next one?
Yeah, so March 30th is going to be the show that I produce. This week I'm at Laugh Shack at Lincoln's. We have a really cool lineup there this week with Adam Grotman and Ben Chadwick and a few other people. And so Laugh Shack at Lincoln's, and then Friday and Saturday night I'm at Chunky's Theater in Manchester, New Hampshire. So that's going to be, which is really good because my show last Saturday got canceled. And so I'm looking forward to having an actual weekend of comedy again because, like I said, I've been in a slump. So, that's some of my stuff coming up.
Fantastic. We got Wayne coming up in a couple weeks for Delusional, right, Wayne? Where's that?
Milford, Mass. Yep.
Remind the people.
Let me before I forget. Let me give you. I'm sorry to stomp right on Wayne's stuff. I'm sorry. Just quick. My Facebook handle, comedian AVG, Al Vinay Ghanekar. It's just my initials, so all one word. Perfect. Comedian AVG. I jumped in on that because I am very bad at giving my handle out. And people. I see comics do it all the time. So I'm sorry, Wayne. What do you got?
We're the same. Like every single episode, we never mention anything about liking, commenting, subscribing, going on our Instagram or TikTok. I get it. We don't do any of that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait. What did you say? What did you say you have coming up?
Yeah. Down in so it's gonna be April Fool's Day down in, I think it's Craft Roots. I think I'll have to look it up. Craft Roots Brewing in Milford, Mass. With Delusional. I'll be there with a bunch of great comics. It'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. That's what's up.
Bang, there you go. See us all. See me nowhere booked by anybody sad in a corner at a bar. They're doing comedy for negative people, meaning people who are not as so little people and they're not even interested to see me. So them, go see those. I'm going to do great for that. And just remember, everybody, this is super important, that every step is a tie it to your dick. Woo! There we go.
If you're forgetting something, tie it to your dick.